You don't want music to be unnecessarily difficult to you. I don't. I'm a professional musician, but I'd like the fundamentals to be as easy as possible for me to achieve dynamics, control, all that stuff. And so a well constructed instrument can make that happen. But there's a lot of other sort of things that you have to work out in order to make instruments easier. And sometimes attributes of instruments that are inherent to the identity of the instrument are unworkable in certain contexts. For example, small spaces like opera pits, or if you're moving around like you're in some sort of dance band situation, or marching bands. And there are some instruments that just do not work at all in marching band, like the piano or the organ. You're not going to see those in marching bands. And even ones that are less obvious than that may have certain attributes that make them unworkable in a marching situation, like double reed instruments. First of all, they don't project very much, but oboes and bassoons have those double reeds, which are very fragile. And if you jostle your mouth too much, you not only do you risk pulling it off of the bocal or out of the tube, you could just shatter it in your mouth, and that's pretty stupid. Bassoons especially are bad because of that very thin, long bocal that they use. So it's just a terrible idea to march with a bassoon at all. Another instrument that comes to mind that's not super great for a marching context is the trombone. Now, I don't play trombone normally. I'm a trumpet player. So anytime I pick up a trombone, a slide one, I have to really work hard to get these notes in tune. And there's no frets, there's no lines, there's no guide things. You just have to learn by muscle memory to do that. Now, trombonists, they have that as a kind of lifestyle. They really get into, like, this is the effort that you do to get this instrument to work, and we're all here together in this shared work and this shared, trauma, if you will, of learning trombone. And they believe very strongly in the project. But that makes trombone unique among modern instruments, and that there's no other brass instruments that use slides anymore. In marching context, the problem is that all the difficulty of getting those positions when you're sitting and not moving around it's made much worse when you're walking and you got to move around positions up and down if you're doing some sort of fancy DCI stuff. So marching trombone just sounds like a lot of trouble. There are other tenor voiced instruments in marching bands like euphonium or baritone. And if you want the trombone sound, you either have to deal with the problems of the trombone as it is or come up with another solution. Valve trombones were developed in the 19th century, I believe, to replace trombones in pit orchestras because they take up somewhat less of the real estate in a horizontal way. Trombones are already quite long. You do this, the bell's there, and then the slide goes way out in front. And then they get longer when you make the slide longer to hit lower notes in your partial. And so you already have something that's built to be as long as possible and then is getting rapidly longer and shorter. It's a problem in pits. And Brussels opera as a very small pit, and so they were using valve trombones for many years. So using one in a marching band takes out not only the slide problem, but also some of the horizontal real estate that it needs. But it could still be smaller because it is still built horizontally with that peculiar shape. And if you're in a marching band, you may need to be in a tight formation where something like a trombone is going to make that problematic. And so people did think, well, why don't we just make it vertical rather than horizontal? And the person who thought of that we're going to talk about today is H.N. White. H.N. White had his own music instrument company that eventually became King Musical Instruments, and they were one of the great standard bearers of mid-century American band instrument making, along with Kahn and Holton and all those others, and Reynolds. And they made a lot of really great instruments. And in 1938, they unveiled two instruments for marching bands to replace instruments that were otherwise difficult or had some weird attributes. One of them is the altonium. The altonium was made to replace French horns, and those did not catch on at all. I don't have one. But the other one did have some success, and that's what I've got today. I have the King trombonium. unveiled in 1938. These made these for about 40 years, I think, and stopped in the mid-70s, and were made for marching bands. You may have heard this name before, and one thing that helped get this name to catch on was that in the 1950s, J.J. Johnson and Kay Winding, the famous jazz trombonist, both got these and would do two trombone, combo music on them. There's a Newport Jazz Festival record where one side is Dave Brubeck and the other side is Kay Winding and J.J. Johnson, and where they play these instruments on a couple of tracks. So it has a longer reputation life than some other sort of not made anymore instruments, partially because of that. And they have a bit of a cult following. I've known about this for a long time, and I had never seen one in person until very recently, I think just a few days ago, when I went up to meet someone in my area who had one for sale, and I really liked it, and I bought it, and now I'm going to get to talk about it with you. This particular one was made in 1947, and it is in really, really nice shape. Valves are great. The lacquer is almost immaculate. A couple of less important slides are seized up, so I'll have to work on that. But it's complete. It came in its original case, and I was just really, really happy to find it like that. So let's discuss what it actually is. If you were to squint at this, you'd say that's a baritone or euphonium, because it is shaped like that. You've got a lead pipe on the side of the bell. It goes into a valve section here, and then all the other piping is arranged in a kind of big vertical loop, and then goes up, down, around, and out a bell on the top. This you can obviously see is a forward bell model. It's made for marching bands, and marching bands are always very concerned about having your sound go straight ahead of you. They don't make recording bell instruments anymore, partially because the intonation isn't very good, and you can't put mutes in them, so I can't use a mute with this. You can see this little knob here. This is to adjust the position of the bell. If you loosen it, you can see that it will turn around. I'm making it kind of difficult on myself. There we go. That's much better. So I have it at an angle from the front because the way the lead pipe is positioned, it doesn't have the valve block pointing straight forward. It has it at an angle, and so if you adjust the bell to match the way the lead pipe is, then when you're playing it, it will be going straight forward. Now you can see pretty immediately also that the tubing is a lot thinner on this than it is on a baritone or euphonium. So much so that there are noticeable gaps visually, and the joke I was making is that this is basically the skeleton of a baritone, like you flayed all the flesh off and removed all the meat, and you have this left. And as such, you're imagining, well, the sound is going to be thin compared to a baritone or euphonium, and you are correct. This is not meant to be a baritone or euphonium. This is meant to sound like a trombone. Trombones are what you call cylindrical bore instruments, where the tubing stays the same width through most of the body. Conical bore instruments, baritones, euphoniums, and cornets and tubas, get gradually larger and larger and larger as they go throughout the body. But you can see here in the lead pipe, it starts at one length, and it goes through, and then the width stays basically the same through the valve section. Get in the back, starting about hereabouts. You can see it goes through this loop, and it starts to get a little wider, a little wider, a little wider, and then gets gradually wider, 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 and then there's a big bloom, and it goes out the big bell. So it's going to have a much more cylindrical sound like a trumpet or a trombone. And specifically, it's going to sound like a small bore trombone, which shows its age somewhat. Most professional trombonists these days prefer to play large bore instruments for classical settings. That's just the current standard. Small bore is still sometimes held on to for jazz, and teaching instruments tend to be smaller bore because they're lightweight, but pros, they use a large bore thing. And so this is going to sound maybe antiquated, is the word for it. And it's going to definitely have different effects that you're going to want to use. But I think this is a really, really good instrument. It's not the greatest instrument I've ever played, I guess, but it's a really solid instrument, and it's easy to play. I'll tell you how it's easy to play. I have tried marching trombone before. A friend of mine has one that's in the current sort of format where it's wrapped like a trumpet or a cornet. And I got to tell you, taking like almost a large bore trombone sound style tube and wrapping it like this, like a Gordian knot, and holding it in front of your face is not only heavy to hold, but difficult to blow through. This particular one, I had to strain really hard to get a good sound out of it. Basically, the only good thing it could do is going whoa at one very narrow, difficult to reach volume and pressure level. It was a pain in the ass to play. And so when I got this and it didn't have that problem, I was just so delighted. This is really easy to blow through. This is the responsive instrument that you want in this range. You know, maybe even more responsive than the other trombones I've tried. It's very free and open tubing. There is just enough resistance in the wrap style, so it's not just like whoosh right falling down the thing, and it's not very usable. It's a great balance in that respect. The intonation is pretty good on this, which is a relief because sometimes you have lousy intonation on these horns, and just in general the construction is really, really solid. So that's a joy. And so you probably just want to hear me play this thing, so let's do a little playing. It sounds like a trombone, right? I played this next to other trombone like the other night. They sound both like trombones, and so that's pretty cool. It's remarkable how you can just redo the shape almost completely and still get the same sound. And, again, I'm not like a professional trombonist, so I haven't been trying to refine that kind of breaking sound, but it just does it. So that's great. And this is, because it is small bore, it's optimized a little better for the upper range than for the lower range. I can demonstrate that. That's fairly easy. When you get down low, it gets a little murkier. I'm also using a mouthpiece that came with the instrument that's a little bit mysterious. I don't know if you can read this very well, but it just says USA 12C. I don't know who made this. It came with a horn. The person who sold to me didn't know. And so this could be a King mouthpiece. I don't really think that it's contemporaneous to this instrument. This is from 1947. This, just based on the font and the condition, I'm guessing is something later, but I don't know. If you know, just comment, and that's cool. I tried out a Bach 6.5 AL mouthpiece on it, which I got with the trombone, and that's definitely something that is geared more towards a larger bore instrument because it immediately tried to fill out the body of the sound, but I was not very satisfied with it, and I think it's partially because this mouthpiece gives more middle and easy control of the volume and tone than that one does. And it makes me realize that this is probably for a small bore trombone, and if we just embrace that it's a small bore trombone rather than a large bore trombone and don't try to futz around with that, then you're going to have more success. However, if you have one of these and you know what like the best mouthpiece is to use with it, please let me know. The intonation is very nice. There is a little bit of a lack of warmth in softer dynamics. Obviously, a more darker sound is going to get you that. But what I like about this for the sound quality is that I can really physically throw my air through this and get vibrato and get the kind of wild expressive stuff that a jazz soloist really needs. I play a lot of jazz trumpet, and I'm used to moving my air around like a dancer or a boxer, and really punching into accents and doing fast moves and sliding around, and this is very well made to do that. So J.J. Johnson and Kay Winning had the right idea. It is a bright instrument. You can tell when I'm going up high, it's got that breaking sound that you're taking a cylindrical brass instrument, and it's not trying to be overly pretty, but that's satisfying if you want to hear that. So you've got a good option here. So, other attributes that you may find peculiar of this compared to modern trombones. Again, the lack of body on the bottom means that it's not going to be a warm blender. If you want that, you need a baritone or euphonium or a large bore trombone. So this is strictly, I think, a tenor instrument. I was thinking about vocal qualities, and baritone voices have that middle and lower body, which makes them useful for blending in there. Tenor voices tend to just be thinner as they get, and if you can own tenor, then that has a good role. In operas, a sort of thin tenor sound is useful for certain characters, and this is like that. So if you can just embrace that, then you'll have a really good time. If you want to sound like a euphonium, then you're not going to have a good time. But again, this makes everything easier. It's light, it's easy to hold, it's ergonomically satisfying. You can hold it here, but the valves are very nicely set up. The lead pipe is at a comfortable length. You're not going to feel stupid carrying it like the Altonium is overly small. If you watch Trent Hamilton's video on the Altonium, you'll see he looks like an idiot carrying it. You're not going to look like a total idiot carrying this instrument. So would I recommend this? Yes, I would. This is not going to be like the concert mellophone video where I go over all these attributes and I was like, well, what do I really use this for? You're not going to have that problem. If you need a trombone sound at a pinch and you don't mind it as a small bore sound, this will get that for you. It can move really fast. It's an easy doubler. All of the good attributes of this outweigh any kind of bad attributes. And if you're in a combo, this is awesome choice for that. Something different or familiar, but you can do all sorts of tricks. Like no trombone is going to be able to do this. Though if you're bringing Festive Overture to a jazz combo, you're going to get a lot of strange looks. But you can do quick, legatos like this with lots of notes that you can't do on a trombone, or even on a valve trombone. Just the way the weight is set up, it's going to be a lot clunkier and more difficult to move quick. And if you like this idea, but you can't find one of these, a few other companies did try this out because of the success of this. Selmer Bundy was one. American Standard also made something like this. The one that's been recommended to me, specifically if you want a large bore sound, is Kahn's 90G trombonium. These were only made for about 2 years for Ohio State University's marching band. I think they were the only buyer, and they only made maybe 30 of them, so they're extremely rare. But I hear that they're really well made, and they have a large bore sound, so you can get a lot more bark and low stuff and body with them. They are nickel or nickel plated, and they have up bells, and just look like a lot of fun. So if you see one of those for sale and you want it, that's going to be the only time you see for sale, so snap it up. But if you're not trying to get the rarest instrument in the entire world, I would recommend the King trombonium. This is where the name comes from. This is really well done, at least from the vintage of this. It's very well constructed. I don't know how well the later ones fared. Some of them have non-swivelable recorder bells. Some of them have up bells, so just be aware of that. And I think I got a good price on it. It was in the middle somewhere. I think a reasonable price is probably $1,000 or less, or $500. If you can get it cheaper, that's great. But don't get, if somebody's got $1,500 or above, no, it's probably not worth it, because there are other instruments that can replicate this somewhat. And it is a novelty. No one is specifically going to ask for the trombonium unless they're a wacko who happens to know somebody who has one. But I will be using this in the future. I've got combo playing ahead of me. I've got experimental music ahead of me. I'm just very, very happy with this. So the few things I can say against it, there's the lack of body in some way, and so I'm still kind of finding my way with expression and how to control different tone qualities at different volumes. The legatos could be a little smoother. A friend of mine played this, and he said half valving was not very easy on this. The slots are really tight I prefer tight slots to loose ones just because it puts you right in the center of the note. And thankfully the intonation is pretty good, and so it's not going to be a huge problem. But I do notice on legatos they're a bit crunchy compared to playing on most of my other valved instruments of the same or higher range. Obviously, if you're on a tuba, legatos are goofy because the valves are so much bigger and because of the range. But on this, I think they could have been slightly smoother with a bit more refinement. And yeah, also per the intonation, just like every other kind of student level or cheaper instrument like this, it really could have used a fourth valve to improve intonation. It does have up here a kind of adjuster slide for the third valve, which you can use to adjust down those D's and C sharps. It's seized right now, but in general, the intonation on those is not wildly bad, and so I'm not super worried, and I can get that fixed later. But a fourth valve or some sort of trigger would have been great, but they just didn't think of that at the time. This was not something that people were going to buy for using thousands and thousands of dollars. You know, this is a consumer grade instrument, but it's a really good one. It sounds really good. So if you can find one, if you're interested in having a valve small bore trombone that is different, you want a part of history because it's part of jazz history and part of American instrument history, something that inspired other makers, this could be the instrument for you. So I'm really, really happy with this. I really do recommend it for the right settings. And maybe I'll just do a little playing to send us out. I'll try to stop before I get too far away from the source tune. But yeah, the King Trombonium, a good instrument. For something that's not made any more obscure instrument, I'm pretty happy with it. I'm really glad I found this one, and I hope it has many years of good playing with me ahead. So thanks for watching.